What's up, guys? It's Dane here with ABU Games, bringing you a new Snap Keep. This week, I'm bringing you my version of 8-Rack. We're calling it 8-Rat. So the namesake of this deck is 8-Rat. We actually physically have 8 rats in this deck. We have 1 Burglar Rat. Burglar Rat helps us discard whenever it comes in. Each opponent discards a card. New card from Guilds of Ravnica. We have 3 Pack Rat. Pack Rat is basically the namesake of this deck. It is the reason why we made this deck, along with the rack effects. Pack Rat is what's going to win us the game. Pack Rat is a 2-drop, a 1 and a black. Pack Rat's power and toughness are equal to the number of rats you control. For 2 and a black, you can discard a card, put a token onto the battlefield that's a copy of Pack Rat. So towards the mid game, we get going, we get discarding, we get Pack Rat out, and then we just start making rats. And we're gonna make a whole lot more than just 8 rats. Next up, we have a 2 of Ravenous Rat. Very similar to Burglar Rat. Comes down when it comes into play, target opponent discards a card from his or her hand. And finally, your boy, Nezumi Shortfang, coming in for 1 and a black. You pay and tap, target opponent discards a card. Then if that player has no cards in hand, you flip Nezumi Shortfang, and he turns into a 3/3 rack. Beginning of each opponent's upkeep, that player loses 1 life for each of the cards fewer in their hand if there's 3 or less in their hand. So basically it's 3 damage per turn. Once we get that flipped, along with if we have the rack out or if we have, Shrieking Affliction out. So these are all rack effects. So technically there's this is 10 rack, 8 rat, 10 rack, something like that. Next up, we have 4 of Liliana of the Veil as the Planeswalker in this deck. She's just insane. You know what she does. She's amazing and probably the best 3-drop of all time. Next up, we're going to talk about the spells. We have 2 Fatal Push. Fatal Push destroys target creature if it has converted mana cost 2 or less. Revolts, destroy that creature if it has converted mana cost 4 or less. Instead, if a permanent you controlled left the battlefield this turn. So this helps us get out the early game, get out our rats, get going, essentially save that life early game with some of these like Burglar Rats, Ravenous Rats, things like that. Next up, we have a 3 of Funeral Charm. Now, Funeral Charm a lot of times is in 8-rack decks, but it's mainly for the first mode. Funeral Charm lets you choose one. Target player chooses and discards a card, which is the main mode it's used for. But since we actually have creatures in this deck, its second and third modes are or target creature gets +2, -1 until the end of turn, or target creature gains Swamp Walk until the end of turn. So, we can get some of these Pack Rats going, get things in, get damage across a lot easier. That's why we put more Funeral Charms than normal. Next up, we have a 3 of Inquisition of Kozilek. This is just a great card to get early game things out of their opponent's hand. So things we don't want in their hand, like humans, any number of early things like Tron pieces, things like that. We can't take the lands, but we can take their search and stuff. So next up, we have 2 of Raven's Crime. Normally, this is a 4 of in 8-rack, but in this deck, we just don't really want to get rid of our lands that much. We want to be playing other things like our rats and be paying and discarding to our Pack Rat. So Raven's Crime is only a 2 of. Next up, we have 2 of Thoughtseize. Thoughtseize is still one of the best 1-drops printed in all of Magic. This just lets us look at our opponent's hand. It does some damage to us. That's why we only have 2 of. But at the same time, we're taking whatever we want, as opposed to where Inquisition only lets us take CMC 3 or less. Next up, we have a 2 of Vicious Rumors. Vicious Rumors is a new card from Guilds of Ravnica. It's actually one of my favorite commons that came out of the set. It's a 1-drop black sorcery. Vicious Rumors deals 1 damage to each opponent. Each opponent discards a card, then puts the top card of their library into the graveyard, and then you gain 1 life. So actually, I would love a 4 of in this deck. We only put 2 of here to try it out, but realistically, this is a great 1-drop. And it's a 2-point life swing, gaining you life, them draining life. It takes a card from the top of their library, it takes a card from their hand. It just seems like a really good card. I feel like this will be a staple in discard decks coming up here in the future. Next up, we got a 2 of Wrenchmind. Wrenchmind, target player discards 2 cards unless he or she discards an artifact card. So this card is just great. You know, we might take this out against like Affinity or the new Hardened Scale Affinity deck. This will definitely come out. Finally, for spells, we have 2 of Dismember. Things like Eldrazi. You know, just some really big things are coming around in Modern right now, and Dismember helps take care of those. We got things like Grumog Anglers coming down, like we said, Eldrazi, things that a normal Fatal Push can't take care of. And we don't really want to board wipe, but at the same time, we need to deal with larger threats, so this is kind of the best we got. Next up, we're going to talk about the artifacts in this deck. The artifacts in this deck are really simple. It's just 4 of the rack. This rack deck is very similar to the normal 8 rack deck, which we also, our next thing we're going to talk about is enchantments. We have 4 of Shrieking Affliction, but the rack and Shrieking Affliction, along with, you know, our Nezumi Shortfang, things like that, create the rack portion of our deck. We really want our opponent to have no cards in hand. We really want them to take damage each turn, along with our go wide strategy with our rats and our pack rats. Next up, we'll talk briefly about the lands. We have 4 Mutavault. Mutavault obviously can turn into a 2/2 rat, helps pump pack rat, just gets more damage through. We have 15 Swamps and 3 Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth. Urborg is great in this deck, but it is a legendary land, which is why we didn't put the 4 in. I've been playing a lot of 8 rack lately, and I run into a lot of times having to tap the first Urborg before I play the second one. So it's just been kind of an issue, which is why we switched to the 3 of instead of the 4 of. So a total of 22 lands. All right, let's talk about the sideboard. Sideboard for this deck, we have 1 more Fatal Push on the side. Humans, aggro, anything, combo decks, things like Collected Company, things that we just want to kill and easily kill. Fatal Push is really the answer. We have a 2 of Raven's Crime. So if our opponents really start overtaking the game and these rats really aren't getting there, we can kind of switch back to a normal 8 rack deck, and you want the 4 of Raven's Crime to start discarding lands too late game. Next up, we have a 2 of Smallpox. This is great against Tron, things like that. This really just comes down quick. If you need to add it in like we just talked about with the Raven's Crime, switching back to more of an actual 8 rack deck. Next up, we have a 2 of Bontu's Last Reckoning. Bontu's Last Reckoning is great because we can really take a lot of damage and just kind of wait and then just clear the board late game. And this destroys all creatures. Lands you control, though, don't untap until your next turn, so that is the only downfall. But at the same time, if we have Raven's Crime out, we don't really care what's on our board. Or if Raven's Crime is in the graveyard, we can start pitching things to Raven's Crime. We can do other things even without mana. After that, we have 2 more of Dismember. Dismember right now is just insane. It really needs to be in decks, and Dismember can really be in all decks. So because it has the 2 Phyrexian black mana. So if you're playing in a colored deck that isn't black, you know, you can take the 4 life and still kill, you know, -5 until the end of turn. So really screw up a creature's game plan. Next up, we have 1 of Liliana the Last Hope. Liliana the Last Hope is another reason why we can switch back to a 8 rack strategy in the sideboard. You know, if they start boarding in all their board wipes, things like that, well, we can switch back to more of a control. And this just really helps clear the early game, puts us in the mid game, and her ultimate is borderline unbeatable. Next up, we have a 4 of Leyline of the Void. Leyline of the Void is so important in games against graveyard decks. It really helps with competitors that are playing like Hollowed One or people that are playing Lingering Souls. You know, just keeps it out of the graveyard, keeps those creatures from coming over the top. We have an all land deck, so nothing can have reach, nothing can get up there to get those spirits. So really helps take care of those kind of decks. So finally, we have a 1 of Damnation. Once again, along with Bontu's Reckoning, we just want board wipes to clear the board like we talked about. If we need to, we can switch to an 8 rack style deck and be more just straightforward, but we had some fun with these 8 rats. Thanks guys for listening. Once again, this is Dane here with ABU Games, and this was my Snap Keep on 8 Rat. 8 rack.
We should do like the thing that.
It's your boy Nezumi Shortfang. When he flips over, you don't play a thing, cause you're racked. You're racked out.
Oh my god. You guys see
Rats. Burglar Rat.